While most people are aware of the humanitarian achievements of Claire Barton, they don't know that people like Susie Taylor was also there. A former slave, she worked as an unpaid nurse on the same battlefields, performing the same task as Claire Barton, but unlike Claire Barton, she never received the recognition she deserved. This story is dedicated to the untold legacy, to Susie Taylor and the thousands of other unrecognized black Americans who, over more than a century of Red Cross service, have made invaluable contributions to America. In spite of prejudices against them that might have made others turn their back on those in need, a solid core of black Americans have been doing their part. This documentary has been made to set the record straight and honor those dedicated black Americans whose humanitarian actions have made them an integral part of the Red Cross from the beginning.
The year was 1858, and while Lincoln was making a name for himself, debating Stephen Douglas over the rights of states to exclude slavery, there was another Douglas creating even more controversy over human rights. Abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Lincoln called him the most meritorious man of the 19th century. Frederick Douglass was the first among many black Americans who were later to lend their hand to the Red Cross. Through the Civil War and in the years immediately following it, Clara Barton and Frederick Douglass were often seen rallying for human rights. In 1864, the International Red Cross was established in Switzerland, and Clara Barton decided that America needed a Red Cross of its own. For many years she lobbied, often discouraged, often depressed. She turned to those she trusted for advice.
Still depressed. Invited to lunch with Frederick Douglass at Susie Taylor's. I asked their opinion of my course. All decided I should go on.
It really wasn't even until 1882 that President Chester Arthur signed the Treaty of Geneva, making the United States a member of the international organization. And one of the original Central Committee members of the new American Association of Red Cross Societies was Frederick Douglass. So black participation in the destiny of the American Red Cross can be traced to its beginning.
In the intervening years, involvement in the American Red Cross by black Americans continued. In the aftermath of the Sea Island hurricane in 1893, 30,000 blacks, men, women, and children, barely a generation out of slavery, were left homeless. Clara Barton rushed to start relief operations on her own. Moved by stories of the devastation, men from the 54th Massachusetts Colored Regiment, survivors of the same regiment Miss Barton had helped at Fort Wagner, traveled to volunteer their time to help Miss Clara with her own rescue battle. Many citizens chided Clara Barton's efforts, as noted in a letter she wrote to a friend.
Many people are calling my attention to my lack of knowledge of the Negro, that he never did, nor could he be made to work where any free rations or feeding were given. If provided for, he would at once become demoralized, lazy, worthless, and probably uncontrollable.
Despite all the advice, Clara Barton hired her first group of black Red Cross disaster workers. They were hired on to cut and peel potatoes to feed victims. Sprouts from these potatoes were used to reestablish the vegetable gardens that would feed the flood victims long after the Red Cross left. The Sea Island tragedy provides one of the first examples of American blacks helping others through the Red Cross.
And all the telephone lines are down.
7 years later, black survivors of the Sea Island tragedy heard news about a tidal wave that had crashed over Galveston, Texas. Poor as they were, no one knew better how vital immediate help would be. They were among the very first to gather aid and send it to Clara Barton. Taking care of people in times of disaster was only one part of the Red Cross mandate. Through the years, other activities grew in importance. In 1915, Frances Elliott Reed Davis, a nurse at Freedman's Hospital, applied for Red Cross service. Although warned about the rejection she'd face, Davis persisted.
If we all gave up just because we've heard that others have been refused, Negroes will never make headway in the Red Cross.
Frances Elliott Reed Davis. In 1917, she became the first black nurse officially approved for assignment with the Town and Country Nursing Service, an early visiting nurse service provided by the Red Cross. When the U.S. declared war on Germany in 1918, blacks were eager to answer the call to service, both on and off the battlefield. However, recruiting stations generally refused to place black soldiers on the front lines. As if that weren't enough, the military even refused to allow black Red Cross nurses to participate overseas, even though they were being actively recruited by the Red Cross. The national chairman of Red Cross Nursing Services, Jane Delano, tried to explain.
We are enrolling colored nurses at the present time and shall continue to do so in order that they may be available if at any time there is an opportunity to assign them to duty in military hospitals.
The time and opportunity, however, never came, but not without protest. Emmett Scott, who was Secretary of War and former confidential secretary to Booker T. Washington, even called a conference of 31 leading black newspapermen. They supported the war and called for the uses of Negro Red Cross nurses. But once again, the military refused.
We wanted very much to go over there. The Red Cross recruited us before we graduated, and we were hoping for overseas assignment. But the Army didn't call us up.
Eileen Stewart, former Red Cross nurse. After the war ended, the Secretary of War finally recognized those dedicated nurses. Ms. Eileen Stewart and 18 others became the first black women to serve veterans through the Army Nurse Corps. Also at war's end, black organizations and leaders gathered to help complete the financing of the costs of the war.
In the drive of the American Red Cross for a relief fund of $100 million in 1918, the colored citizens of the country contributed their proportionate share. Colored speakers eloquently pointed out the duty of the race to give liberally to the fund, and women and children daily took up collections